We start بنبلش؟
نعم.
اوكي تمام.
أنا جاهز وأستمع جيدا.
خلاص لكن تمام شكرا. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a very interesting conversation with Dr. Youssef Shawarbeh, the mayor of Amman, to discuss around the role of cities and the competencies and resources that they have to act as safe harbors for migrants and refugees. Dr. Shawarbeh, welcome. My name is Nadim Houri, and I'll be your conversant today. I'm the executive director of the Arab Reform Initiative. And let me start by asking you, Jordan has been for a long time, a hub of migration within the region, and particularly the capital city, Amman, the city for which you are the mayor. Some estimates indicate that 30% of Amman's inhabitants describe themselves as foreign-born. Other statistics indicate that almost half the population of the actual city is made up of migrants and refugees. I know there's been many waves of migration over the last decades. And let me start by asking you, how has the development of Amman been influenced by these different flows of migrants and refugees? And given the high percentage, what sort of main challenges and difficulties it has caused for you as a mayor and for the municipality?
Thank you, Nadim, for the kind introduction. Yes, indeed, the city of Amman is the political and economic capital of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Amman holds an important geographically strategic position within the eastern Mediterranean region. The population of the city is now estimated at more than 45% of the overall population of Jordan, and since the establishment of the municipality of Amman in 1909, the city has been the destination of successive waves of migrants and refugees, and the demographic makeup is being determined by the blending of populations that originated in those historical and current migratory flows. Indeed, Amman, just like any other city in the world, is facing a migration challenge, a significant challenge, regardless of the migration form, nature, or trend. There are internal migration waves to the capital city from other cities and rural areas, and also there are other waves of migrants coming from neighboring countries due to economic problems. We have also received increasing numbers of refugees fleeing the wars over the past 70 years, beginning with the Arab-Israeli wars in 1948 and 1967, to the two Gulf Wars, the war in Yemen, and the events in Syria and the Lebanese civil war. We have welcomed refugees coming from places as far as sub-Saharan Africa, Libya, Sudan, and other refugees from around the world during a very long period of time. What are the consequences? Amman was not capable of developing a sound urban planning of its own will and choice. Amman is forced not to grow naturally and conventionally. Instead, Amman has experienced rapid urban sprawl, a massive population boom. All of these factors are placing an enormous pressure on infrastructure, social services, a pressure on roads, the environment, economy, and water resources, sanitation, education, healthcare services, and so on and so forth, and all other services. So all of these services are under increasing pressure, but owing to the accumulated experience we have gained over time, on how to best deal with those factors, circumstances, and waves, we managed to successfully address the challenges faced and deal with those compelling circumstances and the sudden and dramatic increase in population. Certainly, the municipality of Amman is not acting in isolation, but rather acting under the umbrella of the Jordanian government and state. In addition, the municipality has concluded large-scale partnerships with international organizations, which have been enabling us to address those challenges. Now I can safely argue that we have gained an extensive experience in crisis management. We build positive and meaningful interaction with migrants and refugees. We don't deal with them as strangers to the city, despite the fact that they are placed or they are placing tremendous pressure on infrastructure, environment, job market, and water resources. They are rather perceived as an opportunity for development and investment. The municipality is providing inclusive and equitable services for all people, regardless of their legal status. Certainly, this enables us to work with discipline and foresight when creating our future strategic plans. These plans are developed using multi-source data and are always supplemented with plans B for any exceptional scenarios. Then
follow-up question before getting into the point you mentioned about the interaction between the city of Amman and the government of Jordan, as well as the NGOs. I know Amman has taken a number of interesting initiatives, sometimes very local, micro initiatives, sometimes bigger, to facilitate the social cohesion between local well-established residents and migrants and refugees arriving. Can you briefly give us a few examples of some of the initiatives the city of Amman has been able to take, particularly in recent years, to deal with this inflow and to sort of maximize, I would say, social cohesion or integration in the city for newcomers such as migrants and refugees?
Yes, the most important thing is to instill a tolerant culture within the host population or the residents of Amman in order to prevent any sort of aggressive or hostile behavior against refugees and any sort of perception that the refugees are strangers. We had to develop programs building social and cultural bridges between the local population and refugees. There is a critical feature of migration in Jordan is that most of the migratory flows are originating in neighboring countries with whom we share so many things in common. Integration is facilitated by similarity of language, faith, customs, and culture. So migrants coming from these countries are well integrated into local society. When launching social programs such as healthcare programs, psychological support programs targeting women, children, or employment, we develop parallel programs targeting both the host communities and the immigrants, so that a sense of partnership is promoted and the local population will not develop a feeling that there is a sort of competition. Thus, our approach to international support programs stresses on the need to develop parallel channels targeting the host community on the one hand and the refugees on their programs on the other. This way, we will be having assistance fairly distributed. This is the case of the Cash for Work program. It is targeting the migrants and the local population on equal footing. This approach applies to all other cultural and healthcare programs. As you might know, there is in Jordan a national response plan put in place by the Jordanian government. We are all working under the banner of such response plan, with each authority stressing on the item most relevant for it.
Which is, given the complexity and the numbers of the issues facing, it obviously requires a lot of coordination between the city, the municipality, the state, but also, as you mentioned, particularly when it comes to refugees, you have a lot of international organizations, maybe humanitarian groups being involved. And how is cooperation and coordination taking place in such a complex institutional framework and frankly a complex situation? Because you might have Syrian refugees, you might have people from Libya, you might have some Iraqis who've been here, you also have Palestinians who've been here since 1948, since 1967. So how is this cooperation happening? Have there been lessons learned? Has this evolved over time? And how are resources distributed? You began telling us as well, for instance, how any international aid should also go to the country, the government, but also the municipality that is preserving everyone. Can you tell us a bit more about this mechanism of coordination and what has worked well or maybe less well in your view?
It should be noted that since 1967, Jordan has welcomed 2 million Palestinian refugees, of which about 1 million located in Amman, up to the state. They are receiving support and help from the UNRWA program, as you know. The response action plan developed by the government basically covers the most recent wave of Syrian refugees and their camps. Jordan has only one window to the world, to the international organizations, which is that of the Ministry of Planning and International Cooperation. Such unification is meant to make the effort very well coordinated, very well organized, and to provide evenly and neutrally distributed support and services among all parties. By all parties, I mean, as I said earlier, all host communities, the refugees and the relief organization or CSOs. The coordination, as I said earlier, there is a very close coordination between the municipality of Amman and the central government of Jordan, especially in terms of data sharing. The National Response Plan has 3 objectives, namely promoting host communities, institutional capacity building, and support of refugees. Under these headings, we have services including healthcare, education, employment, training, all services, energy, transport, public transport, and all other departments concerned with service provision and the refugees. There are so many poor municipalities and some rural, remote areas which need much more support than others, especially a need for better roads and infrastructure. Here comes the importance of the umbrella policy of the Jordanian response plan. The plan has been shared with all international organizations along with exact and reliable data. Frankly, we look forward to a better service provision. I would like to extend my thanks to all partners, international organizations, for supporting the municipality of Amman, Jordan, refugees and migrants. But unfortunately, the support base has decreased over time because challenges have become even more acute. There is need to scale up, not to decrease support from our friends and allies. We need continued full support for Jordan. As you might know, Jordan is a country lacking natural resources. It is not a rich country. It is a non-oil producing country. Jordan is one of the 3 water poorest countries on earth. Water scarcity is another challenge, putting an additional layer of pressure on the government and the municipalities. That's why we need the support spirit to be revived. The pace to be revived by our partners and friends. We need much more support for the institutions and organizations offering support to refugees and migrants. Thank you.
Answer. One follow-up question on this, because you were mentioning the challenges of water, for instance, that Jordan faces, particularly given the increased demographic pressure. Just curious, so in the municipality, do you have a point person as well to follow up with the different UN agencies and international organizations? or does everything go through the ministry, even at the implementation level? So for instance, if there's a particularly maybe underserved neighborhood in Amman, or a neighborhood that there's a lot of demographic pressure because there's a lot of the refugees or migrants are there, do you have someone in your team directly liaising with UNRWA, with UNHCR, maybe with other UN agencies or with international agencies? Or is the coordination always under the umbrella of the ministry and they do that?
Right, coordination is within the purview of the municipality. However, the Ministry of Water Resources is in charge of water, and the same thing holds true for health and health. However, infrastructure is under the prerogatives of the municipality. That's why there is close coordination between various stakeholders within the city.
As we've been discussing, and I think the case of Amman is a very good example, is over the last decades and maybe throughout history, we've seen human movement always towards urban areas. And I think you started by saying that almost half the population of Jordan now lives in Amman, almost in the greater Amman area. And this is something we're seeing increasingly in most urban centers around the Mediterranean. And we are seeing increasingly cities, not only in the Arab world or in the southern part of the Mediterranean, but all around the Mediterranean, struggle to address the increasing needs of this demographic change, and also in addition to some of the challenges around social cohesion and integration, not just between migrants who may come or refugees from other countries, but even between rural and urban, different traditions, different ways of living. And as a mayor of a city that has really been at the forefront of these challenges, what do you think cities need? Not just Amman, but generally, what do cities need to be in a better situation to address these migration challenges? And do you feel, or do you think that exchanges between city around the Mediterranean, city to city learning, will facilitate or contribute to enhance capacity? Would you like to be able to learn from other cities how they've dealt particular problems? And do you feel you have this space today to exchange and learn from other people? Because I am sure you have a very difficult and lonely job sometimes. You have to find quickly solutions to and with limited means. So I'd be very interested to hear your views on that.
محدودة، فهلا أنت من المراسلين سيدي. Look, I do believe in the saying, the Arabic saying that goes, one hand cannot clap, or what's the sound of one hand clapping, or even it takes two to tango. It takes two to tango. Success by definition is a collective endeavor, and no one can claim to be successful relying solely on individual efforts. We cannot achieve any success without genuine programs of partnership, cooperation, and experience sharing. The challenge of migration is both massive and complex, and migratory flows have never been limited or suppressed in the past, and will never cease to exist in the future for so many reasons. It is my hope that the extenuating circumstances of pandemics and wars will never be the compelling factors driving people to migrate. I hope that those circumstances cease to exist and give way to the softer, economically motivated flows. In addition to the financial cost, wars have absolutely disastrous repercussions on the psychology of people, on future generations and social relationships. Yes, indeed, I do firmly believe in cooperation, in that cooperation among cities and states, as well as expertise or experience sharing, are the key factors to overcoming the challenges. And this is very critical in making cities and municipalities work together and build stronger capacity. So cooperation will enable us to address the challenges. And I also would like to invite others to learn from our experience in dealing with the migration issue or in any other area. we have gained a lot of experience, and we are very pleased to make our experience accessible to others in any area. We have very good relations with other Mediterranean states, eastern, northern states and cities. We have good relations with all of these countries. We do exchange visits, share expertise, and replicate their experiences in Jordan. So genuine partnership has to be based mainly on genuine partnership has to be based mainly on mutual interest and benefit, and not on formal exchange of courtesies or compliments. We need to learn from these experiences that will help any municipality to build its capacity and to deal with those exceptional circumstances. We do firmly believe in genuine and consistent cooperation to make the lives of migrants and refugees much better.
Shukran. Thank you very much. And I think you mentioned it earlier that Amman, like a number of other cities, have really had to pioneer, to innovate, to in their migration policies, to build cohesive societies. You talked about social integration, ensuring that the local residents, you reduce tension between local residents and newcomers, be they migrants, refugees, or maybe people coming from the different parts of Jordan. And this has been a central concern. One criticism has been of the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the institutional creation that was created now almost a decade ago, that it does not sufficiently acknowledge and address the role of cities, in playing in this field, that often it is municipalities that are the closest to the points of tension and that may have the tools to resolve some of these problems. So I think today, as we're sort of discussing more broadly about the need for more support for cities, to what extent do you think Euro-Mediterranean cooperation could help the capacity of cities in the field of migration? And I know you were mentioning earlier that there needs to be more support. More support is needed given the size of the challenges. And do you think there should be space for more intergovernmental dialogue mechanisms, or even intercity dialogue mechanisms that are institutionalized, that need to be put in place? Or you described having good relationship with everyone, or is the sort of bilateral discussions that you're having today, in your view, sufficient? Because a lot of people feel that in the next phase of Euromed cooperation, there's a real need to strengthen the relationships and the support between those closest to the ground, who can innovate and who are dealing with social cohesion on a day-to-day basis. So I'd be interested to hear, the view from where you're sitting in Amman in your role.
Yes. At the political level or high-level politics in any state, cooperation has to take place between governments and states. But in the municipality of Amman, we do firmly believe that the future is for the municipalities. Therefore, there is need to empower the cities and to improve their capacities, increase their resources, and enhance the skills of their employees, so as to provide better services to the residents. When I speak about residents here, I don't distinguish between legal residents with legal status and residents with non-legal residents. So some people might argue that the cooperation has to take place between states only. But there are huge disparities in the current system of international relations. Poor relations might impact negatively refugee support. We don't like to have a situation in which political calculations will be the determinant factors leading humanitarian assistance. I think if cooperation takes place at the level of cities and municipalities, it will be more efficient as cities are closer to migrants and the grassroots. It is argued that the local governments are the fundamental building blocks for any society, for any state. They act in the bottom of the power pyramid. We need to start working from this pyramid level and enhance the cooperation between local governments. Across the Mediterranean basin, municipalities are the cornerstone in the state, for they are the closest entity to citizens, refugees, to investors, to students, tourists, and even passing by visitors. The services that municipalities provide are inclusive and delivered to all without any discrimination, regardless of whether they are educated or illiterate, residents or non-residents, people with legal status or with illegal status. This does not apply in the case of highest level politics. So I am a proponent of any piece of legislation or any initiative calling or stipulating that cooperation relationships should be established between municipalities and local governments. Of course, these relations should be subjected to some control, oversight and accountability by the state. Checks and balances is the constitutional principle that we should observe across. Access to data is another constitutional right. Data have to be reliable, exact and precise. Procedures have to be legal and sound. So I cannot stress enough the fact that future is for cities.
We cannot have a discussion in 2020 and not talk about Corona, that has really affected everyone's lives, and including it has affected migration. It may have stopped it for a while, but maybe many people are worried that afterwards we will maybe see new flows of migration, different for people looking for a job, because the impact of the crisis is still being felt. And this will have a direct impact on cities, that have also been in many ways at the front line of having to deal with the medium to long-term impact of the pandemic. Two questions for you. How has COVID-19 crisis affected Amman, your city, directly? Are there particular concerns you have for today or for the future? And do you think the pandemic has changed migration patterns for, in the long term? Has it made, in some cities, for instance, in Europe, we're starting to see a movement, people wanting to leave the city because they realize that maybe it's better to be in rural areas during pandemics. What is the perspective from Amman?
ورأيكم وما هو الوضع في عمان؟ Yes, just like any other city in the world, Amman has been severely affected by the pandemic. We are now experiencing the peak period of the pandemic in Amman. No less than 6,000 cases of infection are recorded on a daily basis, and about 50 cases of corona-related deaths daily. The economic and psychological impacts are huge in Amman. By economic impacts, I basically mean the losses of income, the income of individuals and businesses, and the revenues of the municipality, especially those small businesses. So these are really severe impacts. The repercussions of coronavirus are worse than war, even worse than war impacts. The pandemic has impacted everyone without exception thus far. The wars, they affect just cities and states. So they impacted, the coronavirus impacted everyone without exception. We work on enhancing the cleaning, the sterilization of streets, along with the markets frequented by people. We try to develop our electronic services. Indeed, more than 90% of our services are provided provided online to citizens now, to make applications or send grievances online. Honestly, I would like to say this. Over history, we have received so many waves of migrants, but now I would like to warn the world against the waves that would be generated by the coronavirus outbreak. We need to start preparing for response action plans that will be badly needed. Migration will not be soft, between inverted commas. It will be even harder and much more complex, and it will severely affect job opportunities which have already become scarce. We have received some resistance from some shop owners, and there are some closures by the governments. So the battle is not easy. It is twofold. We have waged one battle against the pandemic and another uphill battle to be launched against the impacts of the pandemic. We have to be ready for that battle. We need to prepare clear and transparent actions, and there is need for a better coordinated action involving all stakeholders such as national entities, the defense and security services, and other international actors. Economically speaking, the outlook for 2021 is grim. We need to build our action plans based on the worst case scenarios. We need to deal with the challenge. We look forward to a different type of relation of cooperation with the other entities. Thank you.
Patterns of migration that may come because of Corona. And we have seen definitely here in Europe that this pressure on the economic well-being of everyone. People feel increasingly poorer because of the health and economic situation. This has been accompanied by a rise in the far right, increasingly by nationalist politicians that say, we want to close borders, and even within borders that try to stigmatize maybe migrants or refugees, saying, because they live in poorer areas, they have higher number of cases of Corona. We don't want them in this country. We want to push them out. We've really seen it exploited by people for, against immigration, particularly, I would say, in Europe. And you mentioned here as well the role of, in anticipation, giving the capacity maybe for cities and local authorities to maybe deal with these new economic challenges that will come up because of the Corona. I'm curious to see, how do you see potentially a new form of partnership, a Euro-Mediterranean partnership, that might be able to address, one, the new economic challenges, and maybe two, even address some of this rising xenophobia, because people suddenly feel more threatened, poorer, and it's the easiest is to blame the foreigner, the other. Do you see space for more Euro-Mediterranean partnership to address what you're calling to be 2021 is going to be a difficult year? What would you find helpful from Amman to address these challenges that you're seeing? What sort of solidarity would be helpful?
ما طبيعة التضامن والتعاون بين المدن المتوسطية التي تراها لمجابهة هذا كره الأجانب؟ Yeah, certainly this phenomenon varies a lot from one city to another and from one state to another based on its nature and based on the migration trend. Migration taking place from the eastern part of the basin to the western part is like crossing to another culture, because the cultural and economic discrepancies are huge. But when migration flows remain in the eastern Mediterranean, the resistance will be less or softer, because there is no cultural differences, and migrants migrants are not crossing to another culture. So when you head to the west, the resistance becomes fierce due to the differences in religion, race, and language. Local inhabitants feel that the newcomers who will be are going to compete them over employment, education, resources, and even social security. Some people might think that migration will seriously affect their life. That's why we need to develop very targeted programs to try to enhance the relationship between the host communities and the migrants. Unfortunately, some misconduct and misbehavior by migrants give negative impression about them who are seeking legal ways to migrate. The relationship will persist, and this is the nature of human being, persist of people naturally feeling threatened by any newcomer. This is a human character, human nature. But when there are programs targeting local culture, a culture of the citizens, that local residents can show them that we are all under the umbrella of a humanity. If you have a right to life, there is another person coming from somewhere else who is having also the same right. We need to integrate the migrants positively and in the host community, and they should not be perceived as a pressure or burden to the local and the host communities. Rather, they should be perceived as an asset contributing to the development of the local community. In so doing, we will be avoiding hostilities between local residents and migrants. So when Europe opened its doors wide for Syrian refugees, some European countries set some terms and conditions for migration, in which they accept refugees based on the criteria of age, educational achievement, and even social status. Why these conditions? Based on age, education, as if refugees were job applicants and not asylum seekers. So we we need to consider these conditions. So in the northern regions in Jordan, we have received migrants and refugees without any conditions whatsoever. We welcomed the elderly, the young, the illiterate, and the educated alike.
Question picking on what you said. Clearly, maybe the Eastern Mediterranean, there's the language, it's closer, but geographically and economically, it has become clear, particularly in the last few years, how interdependent all the countries around the Mediterranean are. And do you think there is an opportunity today, after more than all these years of this Euromed partnership, to take it to the next level, as we try to think about the challenges that are coming after the COVID-19 crisis, and maybe the threat that some countries will close their borders? What would be your concluding message to have cities again play such an important role in strengthening social cohesion and being a place of refuge, and to make sure that cities like Amman, like so many other cities, are not left shouldering all the weight on their own, but that there's real solidarity across the Mediterranean for what really are, and becoming increasingly clear, are problems that not a single country and definitely not a single city can tackle on their own. What would be your sort of last concluding message to talk about what does effective partnership from your perspective look like, given the increasing challenges that you are facing?
مواجهة التحديات التي نواجهها جميعا. The main message we need to stress on and to send out is the need for coordination and cooperation between the cities and the international organizations, between cities and the central governments. We need to to empower local administrations and local government and build their capacities. We need to think of programs targeting local communities. We need to create genuine development opportunities in cities. We need to work on persuading local and host communities that migrants are not coming to steal their jobs or to pose another challenge. Host communities need to be taught the way how to build genuine partnerships with migrants. We are called upon to include the migration factor in our strategic and urgent planning programs, and that migration as a phenomenon will certainly continue to happen over and over again. I'm certain about that. And so the main driving factor would be business. So more migration waves will take place, and we need to invest in PPPs, private-public partnerships. The private-public sector alone is not capable of handling the migration burden. So empowering the private sector and the PPPs are solution number one. Improving infrastructure in cities is solution number two. Programs targeting both host communities and refugees is solution number three. Investing in the skills of refugees is for the service of solutions to the service of the cities is solution number four. And finally, good coordination with all stakeholders and partners is solution number five.
I just wanted to thank you very much for your rich insights and important viewpoint on this occasion. Thank you everyone who has watched us today, and I hope everyone stays safe in these difficult times. مع السلامة. شكرا.
شكرا لكم جميعا. شكرا نديم.
Thank you very much. So, thank you, Nadim. Thank you, the interpreter. Thank you very much.